Chris Cordani, Dr. Jerome Corsi's producer here once again. Welcome to the Truth Central. Dr. Corsi is in Ohio currently as he continues with his extensive research into dangerous voter roll algorithms with election interference potential in several states. Ohio investigators have found such code in its voter rolls, and there is suspicion of malicious activity amid the state's official investigation. For today's The Truth Central, we're going to take you to a very recent Lake County, Ohio town hall event where he talks about this. He discusses this fight to expose and stop the use of this algorithm as part of the Real Steel series on The Truth Central. You can find out more about this effort and how to donate to help Dr. Corsi, Andrew Paquette, Dr. Carleen Graves, and the team expose the threat and stop the Real Steel through the website gods5stones.com. That's gods5stones.com. You can see it on the screen if you're watching. Link in description if you're listening and, yes, watching. Now, here's Dr. Corsi's Lake County Town Hall.
I am honored to welcome one of Ohio's favorite sons, Dr. Jerome Cory.
Thank you very much. In this presentation, it's okay to interrupt me. It's better if you ask questions as we go along. I find in all the presentations I'm giving that if you have a question in your mind, it's time to get it answered because you'll be thinking about your question rather than what comes next. And also, other people are probably thinking about the question too. So just go ahead and ask it. I don't mind. It'll advance the discussion. Now, what we're going to discuss today is, everybody says this is going to be very complicated. Well, it is. We're trying to make it simple. So I want everyone to come out of here understanding what's been done. This is maybe one of the greatest election crimes ever committed. And I'm going to conclude by telling you I have come to the conclusion that the intelligence agencies are running our elections. Just like in the book I did with Dr. David Mantik on the JFK assassination that I published in March, which was Dr. Mantik's 30-year work of looking at the X-rays, JFK X-rays. He's a physicist, a PhD physicist, Dr. Mantik, and he's also a radiation oncologist. He reads X-rays for cancer patients. He's been doing that for 4 decades. He's about my age, and he still does locum tenens. He still works actively. And what he's proven, he took a densitometer, which is an instrument that measures the light coming through an X-ray, and he has proved that all 3 X-rays of JFK in the archives are forged to mask evidence of frontal shots. And if you take a look at the book, you can see there's clear evidence of 2 frontal shots that hit Jack Kennedy. One hit his forehead, and you can see the bullet streams across the top of his head. Largest fragment does not exit. The second hit in the temporal bone right here by the ear and blew out the back of his head. And this is indisputable evidence. The book is not being questioned. That's why it was called The Final Analysis. Jack Kennedy was shot twice from the front, and the CIA has been lying to us for 61 years. The Harvey Oswald, none of the shots that hit Jack Kennedy's head came from the angle of the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. It's been a lie since the day it happened. And today I'm going to show you what the intelligence agencies are now doing with our elections. And I think it's shocking. And I want to start out with, and I have quite a few things here to show us. And if I know when to share the audience, I don't want to take up, I want you to have plenty of time. So kind of warn me when it's time to get close to wrapping up. Okay? So I'm going to get down to a couple places where I want to start. The website where you can go to check all this out is called God's 5 Stones. Note there's no apostrophe there, and 5 is spelled out. So G-O-D, no apostrophe S, F-I-V-E-S-T-O-N-E-S.com. And God's 5 Stone, of course, is it's 501c3, but biblically it's the David and Goliath story, where David picks 5 smooth stones from a brook, and they're the right exact ones that God intends to be used to kill Goliath. So this is about getting the right 5 stones to do the job. And I think tonight you're going to conclude this is one of the right 5 stones. I want to begin by showing you here in Ohio. I came into Ohio. I've been working in Ohio now for about a month, and working with Thomas Connors from the Mendenhall law firm in Akron. And Thomas and I have been working together. He's part of this team. The other part of the team is Andrew Paquette, who is the computer genius you're going to be hearing about tonight, who discovered the algorithms. I did not discover the algorithms. My role has been, Thomas Connors called me up one day about 3 months ago and said, I've got this paper, and it's about cryptography schemes being placed in the New York State Board of Election voter registration database. And he says, it's too complicated, I don't understand it. It's too much math, too much cryptography. He said, I want you to tell me if there's anything here or not. Well, I read it that day, I got it, I thought immediately there was something there. A week later, after I studied it, I called him up, said, Thomas, this is 100% accurate. And that's when we decided we would go to work on this. So my first step was in Ohio to contact Frank LaRose's office and to say, he is, of course, Secretary of State, and to say that we wanted to conduct an official investigation before the Office of Secretary of State whether there was an algorithm in the Ohio voter database. And Mr. LaRose agreed to it. We had a meeting on August 21st, 2024, and this is an email you can see here on the screen that comes from Brian Katz, who is the Public Integrity Division Director in the Office of the Ohio Secretary of State. And he said, Dr. Corsi, thank you for helping quickly arrange your team and ours for the meeting yesterday. We take seriously any and all substantiated allegations of impropriety in our elections and appreciate your promptness and direct communication. We'll keep an eye out for your submission of evidence regarding what was discussed on our call yesterday. In the meantime, please feel free to reach out with additional questions. So an official inquiry is being opened in Ohio. And what I'm here to tell you, the reason I'm back in the state right now is that we have found an algorithm in the Ohio database. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a preview of it tonight. But it has not yet been officially presented to the state because Andrew Paquette is finishing the write-up. And we'll also have to do some legal work on this. Yes. Questions? Yes, sir.
I do have a question. Relative to Mr. Katz and his office and the Office of the Secretary of State, Frank LaRose, are you finding that there is sufficient technical expertise in those offices to properly evaluate this situation?
A good question. Everybody hear it? Is there enough tech? Well, first of all, we had a meeting. Let me describe the meeting. We met on August 21st by Zoom, and he had 5 representatives there, and I've got their names. And the meeting was scheduled for half an hour. And Mr. Katz came on and told me how, in fact, that Ohio had been especially diligent and that they were 96% sure there was no problems in the Ohio database, and that, in fact, they were absolutely clear that they'd done everything possible. So it was basically saying to me, you know, I'm considered a conspiracy theorist, which is kind of a joke after all the years of work I've done and things we've proved. But the point is that, and he's, you know, I'm an academic PhD from Harvard in political science, so I probably had some political science points to make that they could easily dismiss. He said, Dr. Corsi, we've done things here that no other state has done, and you'll be surprised at the measures we put in place to be secure. So, Mr. Katz, I appreciate that, and I'm going to show you a few things, and I believe I'm going to show you things that your experts here will say that they've never seen before, and that they can't explain, and that could possibly be, as I'm alleging, a result of mathematical alteration. And so I said, I'm only going to show you a couple charts. So this is the beginning of the, yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I had a question about, you're talking about the database of the state?
Yes.
All right, now, it's my understanding that every board of elections, in every county, 88 counties, they all have a database and it's all rolled up to the state?
Yes.
Okay, so which database has the algorithm, the state one or every county?
After the passage of HAVA,
Yeah.
which was the Help Americans Vote Act in 2002, the state is responsible for maintaining voter IDs.
Okay,
So
so the algorithm's in the state database?
It's state database.
Okay.
In fact, what happens, is this better? Yeah.
Holding the microphone.
Okay, well, then you can use this one maybe to get people to ask questions. I don't know what you're not, but people can come up and ask questions, whatever you want to do, so everybody can hear questions. The county data is not used anymore, except it goes to the state, and then the state gives the numbers.
Okay.
And the state doesn't even give the county, to my knowledge, the state doesn't even give the county back the numbers. So the county loses control. Okay, that's important here in terms of how this scheme is done. So I showed him, I said, I want to show you a couple charts. Now these are scatter plots. Scatter plot means you've got each voter is a dot in this space. And your bottom axis, your y-axis down here is really the registration number. In a sense, how many people have registered which is a function of time. Because more people are going to register in this is Huron County over time. So you start out with nobody registering and you end up with, 100,000 people registering, whatever the number is. There's only about 38,000 people in Huron in total population. And then this axis over here is the number you get. Now, if it's done legitimately, and it is in Huron, you come in first, you get number 1. You come in number 1,000, you get your voter ID is 1,000. That's all done legitimately. And I said, but I want to show you the scatter plot here. And by the way, I'm sure you know Huron County. It's by Sandusky, and it's it's mostly a rural Republican county, mostly farming. 38,000 people according to the last census, and you're not going to get a lot of mail-in ballot fraud for Democrats in Huron County. If you did, nobody would believe it, because there aren't any Democrats really of any sizable number. So you don't bother with Huron County. But you come over to counties, some of the other counties, and Mahoning caught my attention first. And now suddenly, all the voters who are registered in Mahoning County look like they came in this one little block. And this one line of density here, which is hard to understand because like all these people registered on one day. And then all these are over here scattered. And I said, if we look at how it happened, by the time there were 100,000, it's filling in like that, on top of each other so much it looks like a solid block. I said, you got these streams here, which we don't understand how so this is as a result of mathematical alteration. Because it's impossible that people weren't registering in Mahoning County from the beginning. But yet in the scattergram, they all show up here. So there's some formula that erases the date of registration from determining the number you get for voter ID. Okay, so mathematically you would say that voter ID is a function of when you register. Come in and register this day, you get that number. Okay, well this doesn't indicate that. This indicates that everybody came in the same few days and they all got these numbers all clustered up. That didn't happen. Okay, so I showed that to this small group, Brian Katz, and Brian Katz turned to Josh Jaffe. Josh Jaffe is their data analysis manager. I wrote it down. He said, Josh, what's going on here? Josh said, I've never seen it before. He said, I have no explanation for it. He said, Dr. Corsi said this could be mathematical alteration. Could it be? And he basically said yes. So in 5 minutes of 2 charts, I'm saying to the state of Ohio, you may think you've done it perfectly, but you've got a problem because there are algorithms written into your database that you don't know about. And said, I'm not faulting you for that, because there's no reason you would know about it. You're not cryptologists. You don't expect an intelligence agency, the CIA, to be penetrating your state election board and to be playing with your numbers. But this is we can show you this is the result of an algorithm, and we can prove it. We'll find the algorithm, and we'll demonstrate it to you. And again, you'll say, you didn't know it was there. You have no explanation for it. And it is clearly designed to, the purpose of the algorithm is to create false votes. Non-existent people who don't vote, who aren't existed. These people don't even exist. They're made up. And yet they get a legitimate state ID number, which means that they are a legitimate voter. And when they request a mail-in vote, if that ballot runs through the computer, that number has cast a vote. So now you've got a certifiable vote from a voter with a state ID that ran through and voted, and you've got a countable mail-in vote that will pass a recount or a challenge, but yet the voter doesn't exist. Yes, ma'am.
How did you even think to look into this? I mean, what triggered you?
Well, Paquette is the one who did it, and he is a genius. He is a guy who does computer graphics, and I've done a lot with cryptography and mathematics through my entire career, a lot with voting data. And what happens is when you start looking at data sets, if it doesn't fit together right, in other words, if there's a pattern, you begin to discern patterns. You begin to realize that there's another message encoded in here. And so once you get that intuition, then you start looking for the other message. And everybody understands what a code is. In military terms, if you have a message you want to give to your soldiers in battle, you can't send it in plain English. So you put it into a code. You translate it into another set of letters and scribbled up meanings. And when you look at that, you say, this is all scribbled up. So you know you're looking at a code. And it has to be reversible. Because whomever you send it to has to have the code book, and they have to be able to unscramble it and read it. Okay, but if you don't have a code book, you're at sea to know how it was scrambled. And so cryptographers have to spend sometimes years decoding these things. This took 2 years for Andrew to figure out. What I'll show you today. Yes?
Relative to that last question about the origins of this discovery, is it fair to say that Dr. Paquette discovered something similar in New York first, but that led him to look at other states to see how prolific this is?
Yes, New York was discovered first. And the New York algorithm has not been challenged even by New York State, to my knowledge. Okay, hold on. And secondly, he found it in New Jersey. Now, I haven't published New Jersey yet because his article in New York is published in a peer-reviewed journal. And he has an article that's going into a peer-reviewed journal on New Jersey. And I don't want to jeopardize the peer-review status by publishing the article in advance. So I'm leaving that one alone. I came into Ohio. We'll get to the questions here in just a second. I came into Ohio because I grew up in Ohio, and I believe that Frank LaRose is an honest person. I looked at his career, I thought about it hard, and I said, this guy is an honest guy. And I looked at the other board members, and I couldn't see anything that they were doing that was dishonest. And so I felt like in Ohio, having grown up here, that I'd go, if I went to a state where the officials weren't honest, they wouldn't even listen to me. They'd throw me out because they want to keep the scheme. They don't want anybody investigating this. But in Ohio, if I can show it to them, and I can prove I've got a point, and they're willing to listen, if I'm right, they're going to do something about it. Because they're honest. That's what I bet. But I've also got all the data, and if they're not honest, we'll take care of it anyway. So in other words, they basically are going to have a choice pretty soon. And I'm betting that they'll do the right thing. And I think after tonight, you'll be betting they'll do the right thing too. Now we had a couple questions here. Yes, ma'am.
In the past, Michael Lindell has invested thousands and thousands of dollars into different ways of proving the election was stolen. And I don't know what methods that he used, but he got a lot of people that were expertise in. Could you comment on that?
Yes. I know Mike Lindell, and I greatly respect Mike Lindell. All the efforts that have been done so far, and I know most of the people involved in this, I've known them for years. All the efforts that have been done so far have been directed at trying to challenge a certified election. Okay, remember, in all these states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, the elections were certified. I watched the elections in 2020, I saw all these things going on, and I said, all these ballots showing up in the middle of the night, and all this nonsense of trucks driving in, certainly this election won't be certified. But it got certified. And so when I read Andrew's paper, I said, I got it now. They had it set up to be certified. We've all missed the boat. It isn't producing false ballots. It isn't producing false voters. It's producing false voters that you can certify. If you can't certify them, making up numbers doesn't make any difference, because those numbers can be challenged and thrown out. Now, I told Sidney Powell not to go in and say she had the Kraken. Don't do that. I said, because you might not have the Kraken. So, what do you mean? I can show. I said, well, look. I said, Sidney, have you ever participated in an election? I said, when I was in Cleveland in Case Western Reserve, and I started writing books as an undergraduate. I actually started teaching undergraduates as an undergraduate at Case Western Reserve. And the professors in political science would ask me to come along, and when they went to WJW downtown on Euclid Avenue in the 1960s to give out election returns. And I'd be the one who would do the math and say, this candidate is Democrat, he's got to get the following votes out of these precincts, and if he doesn't get it, he's in trouble. So I'd be calling the elections. I've been doing this for decades. Okay, and I said, there's a lot of things that go on when you're in the center getting the data. First of all, the data you get's a mess, because this precinct reports when there's 20%, this precinct reports when there's 40%, and this precinct changes their numbers, and that precinct doesn't report at all until it's done. And so the numbers change. And we see these numbers changing in a Dominion computer. Say, don't bet on that, because sometimes the numbers change for legitimate reasons, and they'll catch you, because the numbers change doesn't mean that it was inherently fraud. So you're going to be shot down. And then, in fact, if you start questioning certified elections, they're going to say you're undermining the election system and you may have committed a crime. Or you may say something about Dominion that Dominion can refute, and now you're in a hole because you're going to get charged with defamation. I also told them, the courts aren't going to touch this, because the truth is, since the beginning of our republic in the 1800s, elections have not followed election laws. So in the 1800s, Thomas Jefferson didn't like John Quincy Adams because of their behavior in France. And John Quincy Adams wasn't particularly tolerant of the behavior that Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin thought was appropriate. And so they fought over presidents in the 1800 and the 1804 election, which the number one was president, number two was vice president, were a mess. And we have violated every rule and law. We have laws on the books we don't follow, we don't look at, we don't read. And I think it was 1876. Ruther B. Hayes was opposing a guy named Tilson for president. And Tilson was like one vote short in the Electoral College from being president. So it got thrown into Congress, the House. And they debated about it for a long time and fought about it. They finally sent a delegation over to a hotel in Washington, and they locked the doors and they said, there's a bunch of food and liquor in here, and when it's gone, it's gone. You're not getting any more. So after a period of time, those guys came to a decision. They decided that Rutherford B. Hayes would be president if the North, the Union Army, was withdrawn from the South and Reconstruction ended. And that's how Rutherford B. Hayes became president. It had nothing to do with any laws. It's a political compromise. So the courts are going to say, our laws, our elections are political. And you all got to settle them out politically. We as courts, we're not going to take these cases. We're not going to give you standing. I mean, I see Marley has, filed in 9 states saying that the HAVA laws weren't followed. Well, of course the HAVA laws weren't followed. What I'm going to show you tonight, if we get around to it here, is that it's a mess. You miss a credit card payment, and they call you up and they say, why did you miss this payment for $32? Okay, so I'm saying we should take our credit card database and use it for voting, and we should take our voting database and use it for credit cards. Nobody would ever pay a credit card. You'd have a dozen of them in your pocket, and they couldn't find you. Because that's the way our politicians have wanted it. When you're designing electoral systems, you've got to assume people are going to cheat. Because they've been cheating forever and stealing elections. Yes, sir.
So basically you're saying it doesn't matter if we have electronic voting, mail-in voting, paper ballots, whatever, none of that makes a difference because it's all changed in the computers afterwards.
Yes, that's right.
Second question real quick. Is this going to make a difference
Yeah, it is.
for this election?
That's what I wanted to know.
Well, it's going to make a difference for this election because I'll tell you some of the things that are ongoing. And some of the things that are ongoing are pretty significant. Yes.
All right, real quick, paper ballots, if you're counting them one by one, would that make a difference? Obviously they didn't, because in 1876 they didn't either, right?
When I was born, there were 150 million people in the United States. Today there's about 350 million people in the United States. We're going to 500 million real fast. I've constantly pointed out all my life to people that in mathematics, a difference in size is a difference in phenomenon. In other words, you take a bumblebee and make it 10 times bigger, the critter can't get off the ground because the aerodynamics don't work. It's too big. We don't fly our modern jetliners with the same aerodynamics that the Wright brothers used. Fundamentally different whole set of engineering. We're going to have to come up with a solution, and it's not going to be immediately apparent, where a person gets a voter ID of some type or other that can't be compromised. Now, there are various ways to do this, and obviously if we can run credit card systems, it can be done. But it's not going to be easy, and the solution is going to be international. And what we've done here today, I think, is paradigm shifting. It's ground shifting, and I want to get into showing you some of it so you can understand just how deep this is. And in fact, I'm going to shift to it, I think, right away. But I want to make one more comment, and that is that we're doing something different. I'm not going down the Mike Lindell path. I'm saying we have found algorithms. And by the way, it is inherently wrong. It is a crime to put any alteration of the state voter database. It violates HAVA. If you go in and substantively change the records, that alone is a crime. Doesn't matter whether it was even used. You can't start going in and fiddling with the records. I can't access the computer and start changing things around in the voter database. That's supposed to be pristine. It's supposed to reflect who you are. Okay, and if it's changed, it's altered, it's done secretly, and that itself is a crime. So I'm saying these algorithms are here. Now, I'm not accusing anybody of ever having used them. I'm not saying that there's been massive voter fraud in the state of Ohio. I don't know. But I know it's wrong that these are here. And so what I'm asking for is discovery. I'm asking for the truth. I'm asking for the public officials to tell us why these algorithms are here, who put them here, how long have they been here, have they been used, who are the criminals if there are criminals, and I'm not making any accusations. I'm just saying I found somebody that is prima facie wrong, and it's your job to figure out why. I haven't committed any crimes. I haven't called anybody a bad name. I haven't said anybody's a criminal. I haven't asked for any saying Ohio is guilty of voter fraud. I'm saying there's an algorithm here, and what are you all going to do about it? And if it's here, And if I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong. Okay, so it's a fundamentally different approach. And it means that I'm saying that, unfortunately, all the last 4 years were doomed to fail, challenging certified elections. And these guys we're dealing with, or the criminals, are a lot smarter than you think they are. The crime is to get a non-person to be a certified voter in the state that only you know exists because you created them. And you created them internal to the database itself. So even if you say, well, we've done everything in Ohio to get rid of the dead people and the people who have moved, and we've cleaned up this database, they weren't going to use those for mail-in fraud. They'll give those to you. Those are throwaways. Okay, in New York they have 300,000 or 400,000 names they created that are sitting there for them to use, that are there for their taking when they want them. And you don't know about them, and if you saw them, they would look like they were real voters. Not sure what that is, but thank you. Let's switch. I want to show you now some of what Paquette has done. Okay, and I'm going to now start sharing some of the. Hold on a second. Let me get here to the one I want. Hold on. I'm going to open the Andrew Paquette paper and show it to you. This is his published paper. And I'm going to increase the size of one table. And there's this one table I can explain to you pretty much what the whole deal is here. I'm trying to economize a little bit on time. So let me zoom in on that. Increase in size.
It's representative government is another illusion.
And I'm going to share this. Okay. So this is so many things open here. Hold on. This I'm trying to find where I have the Zoom, or this where I'm projecting this from my computer. So I guess I don't have. Can you see that? You can see that, right? Can you read it? No. Can't read it. Okay, hold on. Okay, I'll just pull it up over here. I've got so many files in so many different places, you know how it is. Hold on. This is going to be a lot easier to see. We can see that a lot better, can't you? Okay, now I want you to concentrate on these middle ones here. And these are actual records from the New York Voter Board of Election records. And the middle, where it says CID sort, that's the county sort. And you've got the registration date, got the county ID, you've got a short state ID, and then you've got the measure the number between the different items. So the number 8 in this county they were putting in got the number 20,307,396. The next record that they were sorting, the one that voted next, got the number 20,308,507. That's not one more. That's 1,111 more. And in fact, between each of these, they're adding 1,111. Okay, now the 1,111 in mathematics is an unusual number. It's called a rep unit, R-E-P-U-N-I-T. repeat unit. And any number 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, any string of ones can be used as a rep unit. And in cryptography, they're used to rearrange the ordering of items. Now, I'm going to compare, what I'm going to explain to you today is best understood as if you were trying to run a casino and you wanted to mark the cards. Okay, now the first thing is you can't take a deck of cards from the manufacturer and mark them easily because, first of all, they come in cellophane, right? You gotta take the cellophane off. You assume that cellophane came from the manufacturer, you open the deck, and it's ordered from the highest suit, the highest card, to the lowest card, to the lowest suit. So you take your mark cards and you just insert them in. Well, it's obvious that the mark cards are the ones out of order. So you can't do that. So if you want to have a card marking scheme, the first thing you got to do is you got to sort the deck. You got to shuffle them. Okay, and you have to shuffle the cards. Now, when you shuffle the cards and you look at them, they all look out of order. There's no apparent order. That's why you shuffle cards. They're all out of order. You're trying to make them random. So in this scheme, they have to make them random. And what they've done is that they take the normal way numbers should appear, which is your date of registration should determine what voter ID number you get chronologically. And they take the date you registered and they throw that data away. So your voter ID is no longer going to be a function of when you register. It's going to be a function of the number I give you. Now, here's what they're doing in common sense terms. Everybody knows what you say, my first child was, well, everybody knows who the first child was. It was the first one born. Pretty obvious. You say, well, my third child was good with music. Well, you know who the third child was. That was the third child born. You don't get confused. Now, even if you got 7 or 8, maybe your husband occasionally gets confused as to which one's 7 and which one's 8. But I guarantee you that the woman who gave the birth is not confused. She knows who they were and which order they came in. Now, the state says, well, I'm sorry, but your first child is number 1. But your second child is number 12. And your third child is number 23. And your next child is 34. And then you've got 45, and you've got 56. So wait a minute, I don't have 56 kids. So, well, I'm sorry, but your record does have 56 children in it. Now, I would like to explain to you that some of them aren't yours. I'll grant you that. We took them from somebody else, so we just put them in your file. And by the way, of the numbers 2 through 11, 3 of them don't exist at all. I just made them up. Because you see, when I created 1,111 records between the 2 that came in sequentially, I got a lot of files I can throw in there. And if I make up some, you're not going to tell the difference. Because they're all shuffled anyway. And none of this makes any sense except that I've rearranged the numbers. So I've shuffled the deck, I've inserted my cards, and I made up false ones. And the false ones look just like real ones. Because, in fact, I may be clones. They may be changed by a tiny little bit. So if I can show you some of what clones look like here, if I can find the slideshow I have. A clone would, for instance, look like this. So here's a record. These are records from New York. There's a Rachel M. And Rachel M. comes in and she goes into county ID number 72. And she says her registration date was February 7th, 2020. And then also February 8th, 2020, she goes into another county and does another registration. Except that the signature on the card by pixels is identical. So she didn't sign any card. Somebody did this in the computer. They just took her name, changed it a little bit, created another record, took her signature and put it on the other record. They've created a false one. This is a clone. Yes, sir.
One question pops up here. This is sounding great, okay? How many people, or what level of expertise would you need to create this, number one, and then secondly, get it into the system. Would it almost have to be done externally for security purposes?
My conclusion is this is a CIA operation. Because the number schemes resemble the kinds of number schemes the CIA does.
That they've used in other countries.
They've used in other countries. And now they decided to run our elections. Yeah.
How did Trump win in 2016?
Well, this might have helped them. They could have used this to help them at the end. Because the CIA or whomever's running this can decide to go for whomever they want. Okay, because let's kind of fast forward here for a minute.
Crooked intelligence agencies.
Crooked intelligence agencies. We don't need any stupid voters. We know what's best for this country.
So it doesn't matter that the 11 million or whatever illegals came over the border, it doesn't matter, you just make names up.
First of all of this matters because it's all wrong. It's all criminal. Now, what I'm going to tell you is that, I'm going to give you one bit more mechanical thing, then I'm going to go answer your question for a minute. The mechanical thing is this. So you're the one who's running the scheme. You're the criminal. You're CIA, and you've got access to the computer, and you put this algorithm in it. Now, there's other parts of this where you've sorted back into the database the false records, and only you know where they are. Because you get a positional ID. And that's another whole cipher that's done. I can show you the ciphers, and we can demonstrate how it's done mathematically. Okay, now, once that's done, I can be sitting there and I say, well, first of all, I'm going to come to you and say, do you want Kamala Harris to win by 1%? Do you want her to win by 3%? Do you want her to win by 5%? Do you want her to be ahead early in the afternoon? Do you want her to be ahead late in the day? You tell me how to, what's my game plan? Do I stop the voting and come back the next morning and we have the ballots we need? Tell me what to do. I'll run on the computer, because as soon as I see Kamala's numbers going one way or the other, I can draw more of my non-existent voters, make sure they've got mail-in ballots, and mail them and get them through the system. And I can do that all day long, as I want to. So I can influence. I could actually. They're not quite there yet, but Klaus Schwab in the World Economic Forum said we don't need voters anymore. I could, with my knowledge of elections, sit and run a computer simulation of a presidential election. If I didn't like the way the votes came out, I could probably throw away the votes and run my simulation, and you might not be able to know it was different. In other words, I could make voting into a Truman Show, if I was a criminal, in which you thought you were voting, and I knew it didn't matter. Because no matter how you voted, I've got enough votes to make it turn out the way I want. Now, the reason we're doing this now is, number one, when you've seen the scheme, it's harder to use. Because I'm showing you how it works, and if they try it, you're now going to be aware that they're doing it. Number two, they might be able to get an election if they only needed 7% of the votes to be swung against Trump, or to be given new votes, fake votes to Kamala. But if they have to do 11, they can't. That's too hard. They could do it, but it would be too obvious. So it's like anytime you're dealing with a criminal, and I found that a criminal. In the 1980s, I developed a mathematical model predicting the outcome of terrorist events. I published it in an international journal. And I worked with a group of psychiatrists with the State Department for years. They were all crazy, trying to deal with terrorism. I was the only non-psychiatrist of the whole group. I think I was the only one who made any sense at all. And at any rate, what the point is that, you catch criminals by hardening the target. And then we try to get rid of the scheme. And getting rid of the scheme, if I prove to you that the casino has marked cards, that casino cannot prove you lost money. So once Ohio realizes it's got an encrypted scheme within its database, it's inherent in its database, they didn't put it there. That database cannot be used to certify an election. So there's a problem. Yes.
You sort of touched on it, but I'd like to drill down a little bit further on where we go from here. And as we've learned from Mark Cook, who I believe is going to speak later, there's only so much room that they have to cheat. And you touched on that 7%, maybe they can pull off 7, 11 is just too blatantly obvious. So one of the things that I actually have kind of gravitated toward is the concept of what's the expression we're throwing around, too big to rig. So if we go too big to rig, and it was actually a few days ago on Ohio Political News, Mark Cook made the comment, vote as on or as close to election day as possible in order to suddenly overwhelm the system and make any efforts to manipulate the data as apparent as possible. I'd like your opinion on that.
You've got to have a massive turnout.
Yeah.
And a massive turnout that is well watched. So all the efforts going for poll watching, all these things are very important to do.
Yeah.
And don't get discouraged that they've got this system, because you can overwhelm it with the numbers. And now that we expose it, we can say we want greater scrutiny on the mail-in ballots. We can start doing things like we can go out and find out if these mail-in ballot people really existed or not. We can do a lot more due diligence with it, because once we know there's a criminal scheme here, our eyes are open to it. And now we can take steps. And that's the whole point of this. There are remedies here that we can utilize. Yes, sir.
How does this data bank get affected by, like, say, you're using the vote cast record at every precinct? Is that ever compared to what goes on?
It is to some extent, but again, what you're seeing, the anomalies that get reported and are there. So some precincts are voting more people than are registered in the precinct. Some precincts are voting disproportionately heavy for Biden that never voted that way for Democrats. I mean, a lot of the anomalies now make more sense once you understand what the real scheme is and what the real crime is in here. Yes, sir. Then, okay, with the back, you've been had your hand up for some time.
So, my question is what conclusion do you draw for the end game?
We're getting to it. Just let me do a little bit more. The end game is going to be a series of steps to take.
But not just in the rigging. To me, you rig an election, you get your person of choice in office, and eventually my thought process is to have societal control.
Well,
that's why these people are getting elected.
My ultimate solution is take the entire federal bureaucracy and send it to Death Valley and let them have all the solar and wind they want.
And I can tell you there's only going to be one way to do this.
Yes, sir, then you.
So is that part of the strategy of Democratic Congressman, what is it, Jamie Raskin on their side, is if somehow they cannot manipulate the election on November 5th, their goal now then would be to not certify the election to play lawfare. Is that correct?
They're talking about that. I think, quite frankly, and I think after the debate we're about to see tonight, the Democrats, and especially with what I'm doing now with this, and we're getting greater attention, I will be able to demonstrate the cipher that's in Ohio. That I don't want to run out of time, but the cipher that's in Ohio, which I'll show you here in a second, is a different cipher. And it's this modular arithmetic. Modular arithmetic is a 12-hour clock. Modular numbers go through a cycle, and then they, on another scale, continue through the cycle again. So if you say you got a 12-hour clock, so your clock is two 12-hour clocks, then your modulo is 12. And 3 o'clock, then, which is really 15 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, is 3 modular 12. Because it's this 12 plus 3, that's 3 is the position on the second clock. Very complicated scheme. This is the scheme in which the Ohio database is organized, secretly. Now, let me make a couple more points on this. That is, again, I'm sure that the Ohio State does not know it, and we can prove it to them mathematically. We'll be in the process of presenting this evidence more formally, I think, next week. I'm going to stay here and work with the attorneys to figure out the strategy. But it's lock solid. So we have now found algorithms in New York, New Jersey, and Ohio. And Ohio is a very important state, given its prominence in presidential elections historically, and will play a prominent role again this year. So we proved something in Ohio, we're going to prove it to the nation. Okay, now, I'm sure Mr. LaRose will have some choices to make, but I would not recommend saying that this doesn't exist, because we can show it to him mathematically. And now, secondly, on this, I think the Democrats are going to come to the conclusion that they're going to lose the election. Okay, because the point is, first of all, this is the worst two candidates I've seen in American political history since maybe George Wallace picked Curtis LeMay as his running mate in 1968. Well, George Wallace was a racist. Of course, he wanted to keep blacks from going to schools, which was inherently evil and wrong. And he picked Curtis LeMay for his running mate. Well, Curtis LeMay had done strategic bombing in World War II. He learned how to firebomb, create firestorms, bombing German cities. Then he burned down Japan cities. He dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan, all of which may have been a good thing done before, but a lot of people died. And then he wanted to go to nuclear war against the Soviet Union in the Cuban Missile Crisis. Curtis LeMay didn't ever meet anybody that he didn't want to bomb. And he showed up at Jack Kennedy's autopsy smoking a cigar and refused to put it out. He was celebrating. Jack Kennedy had signed an agreement to get out of Vietnam, which was kept secret until the Pentagon Papers released it in 1971. And Lyndon Johnson lied about it. Kennedy wasn't going to go to Vietnam. Kennedy knew that we were running drugs out of Vietnam. He'd been in Vietnam in 1950 as a congressman. And Kennedy, as a senator, was mostly worthless in terms of his Senate career. He was mostly a playboy until I had a lot of association with Kennedy through my life. My dad was Brotherhood of Railroad Trainmen. He was a lobbyist, and he was in Washington the day Kennedy was shot. So I was a truant from school. I wouldn't go to kindergarten. I was a problem for my mother. I refused to go to school. And so I spent a lot of time in Washington. And Jack Kennedy matured. And he did not want to fight wars. Whereas this deep state that now is rushing to the finish wants to fight perpetual wars. They want to have perpetual control. They don't believe in God. They are satanic in their practices, and this is spiritual war we're engaged in.
And they want World War III too.
And they want World War III too. Yes, sir.
So in 2016, it's my belief that they just didn't figure out how much to cheat.
They got caught.
And they guessed wrong.
They guessed wrong.
And so they were waiting till the last minute. In 2020, they figured it out.
Yes.
As a candidate for county commissioner and a few other times that I ran, I did a lot of analysis. I'm a technical guy, and I do my own data analysis. And what I discovered was a lot of anomalies in our data sets. For example, people who are getting in the paper chase, getting ballots, absentee ballots, they don't have a home of record. There's no record and address for them. I pointed that out to Frank LaRose. I pointed it out to our local elected officials. And you know what the response was? We didn't want to deny anybody the right to vote. One of those had chosen a Canadian had chosen a fraudulent address in Jogger County to meet the paper. Our prosecutor, when challenged on it, said, I don't want to deny somebody the right to vote. I can show you anomaly after anomaly in our records, and our Secretary of State, Frank LaRose, I had an hour conversation with him about this, didn't care.
Well, they've had an attitude that everybody ought to vote, and the Democrats have pushed this theme. The truth is only people who are legally qualified to vote, which means citizens, should vote. So they've got a problem to begin with. They want to expand that, and the Democrats have been very successful in saying it's not fair that somebody doesn't get to vote. Well, I'm sorry, they're in the country illegally. Probably they shouldn't be in the country to begin with in terms of strict law. Now, Frank LaRose may think about this differently when he sees what we're showing here tonight.
Are you familiar with the United American Sovereigns?
Yes.
They're suing him. And
Yes,
he doesn't care.
But he doesn't care because what I pointed out before was he's saying this is not a legal, it's not going to be settled in the courts. So the courts are not going to take that. I don't think Marley's case the courts are not going to take. Because they're going to say thank you very much, but this is a political question. And they're probably going to deny standing. Be very surprised if any of these cases get heard. It's the wrong approach. What I'm doing is differently, and why I'm here is once the people understand, the people will change things. When I went into banking, Walter Wriston wanted me. He was a big powerful banker in New York, a Citibank, and he wanted to be in insurance and securities. And he said to me, get me in securities. I said, well, Mr. Wriston, you got the Glass-Steagall Act. It's illegal for you to go into those. He said, well, of course, you don't understand banking. First, you change the business. Then the regulations change, or we change the regulators. Okay, so now when the people understand that these issues of everybody voting have been architected to steal elections, and the crimes are being committed, then people are going to say, I'm sorry, but we're done with this open voting. We're going to have rules. Otherwise, why vote? And by the way, if the intelligence agencies are using this excuse, Mr. LaRose, to run your election, you don't know it. They just made a fool of you. And by the way, if we can demonstrate that there's an algorithm here, and you close your eyes to it, there may be some legal consequences to that. Because you've got certain duties in your office. So I would solidly recommend you do the right thing and refer this to the Attorney General, where it could properly be evaluated. And now I've got secretaries of states from other states calling me up, wanting to talk to me about their states. Okay, because once this gets to be an international issue, they did the same thing so the first vote in the parliamentary election in Europe, the Le Pen and the Conservatives were winning. They did the second vote. They said there's a left surge. Left woke up. Okay, well, I speak French and Italian. I called up in France and Italy and said, are there people, Dr. Cory, there's nobody in the polls. The surge is happening in the computers. Now, if the intelligence agencies are running your elections, they're making fools out of everybody. And they're one step away from saying, we don't need voters. We know how you're going to vote anyway. We'll profile you, and we'll make it turn out the way we want it to turn out. We'll still give you an election. You can still fight over it and think you're doing something. You can be a Truman Show. You can all think you're in a real life situation. We know we're just writing a script for you guys to play out. So, there comes a point where people are going to say, we don't want to be made fools of anymore. This is nonsense. You can't, there's a whole bunch of things that are going to be said to be made a nonsense of. I've yet to see a man give birth to a baby.
Biden will responsible.
We got other questions. 7 minutes. It's going to take maybe a little bit more, but I'll try to.
Questions. Number one, this would have to be introduced, or the algorithm would have to be introduced externally?
Yes, well, it'd have to be introduced. Somebody could do it you'd have to have access to the computers, the mainframe in which the data resided.
Tied up to the internet, or can it be done remotely, or is it
possibly it could be done remotely, but you'd have to have I think this is an intelligence operation because the nature of these algorithms are very expensive to implement.
Okay.
They're extremely complicated, and they made some mistakes which are characteristic of mistakes that the CIA made. For instance, on these algorithms over here, where it's all in one quadrant, I may have put them all in one quadrant if I were the criminal, but I would have said, now I'm going to write another algorithm and make it look straight line. So I'd have rearranged the data one more time. They didn't do that. They put in the name in New York State. They gave this guy Arthur Murillo 23 registrations. and they registered everybody in the state named Morello. He happens to have been a famous identity theft criminal, and they were just making a joke out of it. He was in prison much of this time, and credit card fraud, bank fraud, passport fraud, did every kind of fraud in the book on identity theft, and they gave him votes in New York. Okay, so these are kinds of things the intelligence agents do, and it's giveaways. And if you want the CIA killing Jack Kennedy and lying about it, okay, so why are buildings that come down that were not hit by the airplanes in 9/11 falling down? Building 7, you can see it collapsing. It didn't get hit by an airplane. We invaded Iraq in 1991 because Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Why didn't we find any? Now we got a bad flu pandemic. We got a vaccine that doesn't stop Fauci from getting the disease 9 times. And we're supposed to believe this? We're supposed to believe what they're telling us? But at some point or other, Frank LaRose better figure out what his next career is going to be.
So if they agree with you and say, you're right, we were infected from this. Is this something that can be easily removed from the system?
No. I think our voting system is FUBAR. I think in World War II terms, it's so messed up, it's beyond repair. I think it's got to be thrown, we got to start all over again. We don't have a system that works for 500 million people who don't know each other. 100 people in a village can vote in paper, everybody knows each other, probably knows who's going to vote for anybody anyway. They come and vote for them, and it's perfectly natural. 500 million, you don't know who anybody's voting. You'd be lucky if you saw somebody you knew at the polls. And by the way, we don't maintain the forensic records. So when they do the recounts and they've got these mail-in ballots, they're supposed to have the sheets that were torn off. Well, the dog ate some of them, so we lost them. They got mixed in. We can't find them. And by the way, you're supposed to come in and sign that we're here to vote and you showed ID. Well, we don't go back to that record. Too hard. In certification and recounts, you just say, was there a number that voted? Was that number legitimate? Did it vote? Does it match? It counts. Because you're trying to go through thousands of votes in 2 or 3 days, and you're not going to say, does this person really exist who did a mail-in ballot? No, we show some of this, start getting some challenges in here, and start, before it's certified, coming in and saying that this system can't be used. Or, if I'm wrong, prove I'm wrong. But the algorithms, I'm showing you the number schemes right here, and we could, Andrew Paquette could do this for hours, and it's there. So once it's there, what are you going to do about it? That's the question. And it was modular arithmetic. Has anyone in this room ever heard of modular arithmetic before? No. Probably not. It was a scheme that was designed in 1801. It's rarely used. But again, it's arcane. It's complicated. It's expensive. Ohio, there are like 700, the records in Ohio available for use for voter ID go from 700 million to 1 billion. Well, there's not going to be 1 billion people in Ohio for a long time. And these numbers are just so big that your state registration numbers are coming out to be 8, 9, 10, 12 characters long. This is, the modular arithmetic scheme is absolutely the most complicated, one of the more complicated schemes you could, but they never thought it would get caught because it's not apparent. Take a genius like Andrew Paquette to catch it. Some of these systems take decades to figure out the algorithms. He's figuring this one out in a matter of about 5 weeks. And they called me this morning, we had about an hour discussion on it, and I see, my advantage is I understand the math. I'm kind of a math intuitive. I've done lots of things with math in my life. But what he did to discover this is a unique talent. It has to do with his pattern recognition ability. Okay, and so this was found is almost a miracle. And now that we've found it, I think I'm going to find it. I don't know that I'll find it in every state and every county. We're going to find it very broadly across the country.
Are you traveling with a bodyguard?
Yeah.
Well, if they try to kill me, they'll just make me more famous. I'm already more famous than I wanted. I know. Make one or two more comments, and we're going to wrap up so we don't take up this other gentleman's time. First of all, does everybody get it?
Yes.
Now you do. You got it? And it's explained in common sense terms, so it's not hard to understand. You don't? Anybody here ever got 56 children?
Don't know.
Don't know. That's probably the most honest answer to that question. Have you discussed that with your wife? I recommend you don't do that.
Maybe Adam and Eve had that many children.
Yeah, well, that's good. Good luck. At any rate, so what I want to conclude this with is saying that meetings like this are very important. We'll put this up. I would like to get all the videos of this. Take a look at God's 5 stones. We're putting up new data on there all the time, and people are donating. It's helping us get the work done. I would like to be able to do this in as many states as I can. I'm lining up next, maybe Pennsylvania, maybe Texas, and if we can begin to show every state we're showing this in is another, brick in the wall removed. And pretty soon it's going to be apparent to the American people that the Democratic Party is a criminal party. And that their schemes and their proposals have nothing to do with wanting everybody to vote and caring about everybody. It's their only goal is to get a person who doesn't exist, a legitimate voter number in the state ID system so that person can be voted. And in Cuyahoga County, they don't put an algorithm. They just go out and vote harvest. In other words, they registration harvest. They go to the nursing homes, they go to the vagrant homes, they go to the homeless home, they get a name, they get somebody to sign it, they bring it into the county, they get a legitimate voter ID number. The county does not go out to see if that person exists. The game here is not the computers changing numbers. Those are artifacts. The game here, which is a genius game figured out by these criminals, is to be able to certify non-existing voters. And the whole scheme is to be able to create non-existing voters that they create, that they're not people who moved from the state, they're not people who died, and it's still these are their creations, made up of fiction, including when they go out and vote, register, harvest, get names anywhere. And they come in and they put them on the roll. Now they can use them to cheat and steal. And if the intelligence agencies are running the computers, eventually, all these patterns are being used in Europe. They're being used in Venezuela. You see the patterns now. You know what's going on. Now that's going on. I don't think there's anybody in the room think this is okay?
No.
It's wrong.
It is wrong.
It's got to be stopped. Yes, sir. Last question, and then I'm going to turn it over to this other gentleman.
You were paid once upon a time to call elections. Would you be willing to call the 2024 election?
Trump's going to win by a very large margin. But you got to get out and overwhelm them with votes.
Yeah.
You got to get out and demand that everything that's being done is questioned. You got to have the polling go on. All the measures being taken by all the citizen groups, including Marley, will eventually bear fruit and need to be done. And now when you've seen this, it's like I say with any kind of a crime or any kind of a truth. Once you've seen the truth, you cannot revert to the lie. And that's biblically, we're told that our greatest weapon is the truth. And that's all I'm doing here is I'm telling you the truth. And once you've seen the truth, we can set ourselves free. One last question, yes.
Is there something else that we're supposed to be doing, action steps besides going out to vote and praying?
Those are two very important ones.
Yeah.
Volunteer to poll watch, write letters into Franklin LaRose, express your views, tell them you want action, tell them you're sick of this,
If he doesn't take action, don't run re-election.
Pardon me?
If he doesn't take action, don't run re-election.
Well, again, he's got choices to make, and these are now career choices. And there may be more than career choices depending upon the legal consequences of his decisions.
Who do you think the CIA is answering to? Are they answering to Wall
Pardon me?
Street? Who do you think the CIA is answering to? Are they answering to Wall Street? Are they the Bank of International Settlements? Who are they? The Federal Reserve?
Since the creation of the CIA, it has not been in favor of America. The Dulles brothers, with Brown Brothers Harriman and Prescott Bush, were funding Hitler through Wall Street. Prescott Bush, who's the father of George H.W. Bush, was running a Nazi bank. The Franklin Roosevelt closed down after World War II. They have always liked this idea of a small, self-appointed, elite. The Bill Gateses of the world, the Klaus Schwabs of the world, the oligarchs, the rich, who they think they're especially privileged, and they're going to become God, and they're going to become superhuman, Ubermensch, and they'll work with the multinational corporations. They really don't need any of you, because they can do all of our jobs with machines. And so therefore, they want the official policy of the United States since the 1970s. Henry Kissinger signed National Security Memorandum 200 is depopulation of the world. Okay, and so these demons are replaying the Garden of Eden on Satan's side, and they're not going to get away with it. God's sovereign, and in the end, God always wins. God will win here too.
Thank you. Amen.